The winner or loser of this election, not going to be me. The winner or loser of this election is going to be you.
Everything that they've done, every person before us, all that sacrifice has come to this moment right now.
That we are going to win on November the 8th.
Welcome to SMU-TV's election night coverage. I'm Grace Lawrence.
And I'm Peter Warner. We've got a packed show tonight with reporters stationed across Dallas at the biggest watch parties and at the polls. We'll also hear from the Hilltops political experts live in studio with their take on the night.
Before we begin our coverage, the polls will be closing soon in Texas. Let's take a look at some of the big races we're tracking. There are 7 statewide races, most notably for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. In the gubernatorial election, it's a race between Republican incumbent Greg Abbott and his Democratic challenger Beto O'Rourke. There are no votes in right now, but early polling shows Abbott with a solid lead. O'Rourke hopes distaste about the Uvalde shooting and the power grid failure will boost his chances if elected. He would be the first Democratic governor since the 1990s. The fight for lieutenant governor, the second highest executive office in Texas government, is a familiar one. Incumbent Republican Dan Patrick and Democratic challenger Mike Collier face off for the second time in a repeat of the 2018 race for lieutenant governor. Patrick is seeking a 3rd term.
In the race for Texas Attorney General, it's Republican incumbent Ken Paxton versus Democratic challenger Rochelle Mercedes Garza. 37-year-old Garza is a civil rights attorney. She's remained the underdog in the days leading up to the election. Paxton is seeking his 3rd term, but his re-election has been plagued by legal trouble. The Texas attorney is under FBI investigation and faces separate security frauds charges. Democratic incumbent Clay Jenkins faces a challenge from Republican Lauren Davis for Dallas County judge. With Dallas being reliably blue, an upset would be a huge surprise. Jenkins has served as Dallas County judge since 2011. Davis is a first-timer running for public office. This year's race for Dallas County District Attorney is a rematch of the 2018 contest between Democratic incumbent John Creuzot and Republican Faith Johnson. Johnson lost to Creuzot 4 years ago after Governor Greg Abbott appointed her to the office in December 2016 to replace Republican District Attorney Susan Hawk, who resigned. Johnson ran unopposed in the Republican primary this year. In the Democratic primary, Creuzot defeated Elizabeth Frizzell.
People have been heading to the polls all day today to make sure their voices are heard. This year, the Hughes Trigg Student Center right here on campus is a polling location. That's where we find SMU-TV's Jenny Howell with the latest on how in-person voting has been going this afternoon. Jenny?
There are more than 230 polling locations across Dallas, including this one right here in Hughes Trigg at SMU. The polls opened this morning at 7 a.m. and we've seen people coming to cast their votes all day long. After early voting numbers showed a lower than expected turnout, election officials are hoping for a strong turnout the rest of the day today. The hot topic of the day, of course, is the race for Texas governor between the incumbent Greg Abbott and the Democratic candidate Beto O'Rourke. We talked to a few voters to see how voting was going for them today.
This was my first time voting in person, so it was kind of new and exciting, but it was really easy to do, a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
It really was my first time voting, very easy. I looked up the candidates beforehand and just picked my choices.
We'll be back later in the evening as the polls start closing and results start rolling in. You can also check out our team's election night coverage online at SMUdailycampus.com and our social media with the hashtag SMUVotes2022. For SMU-TV, I'm Jenny Howell.
There's less than 1 hour left to cast your vote. As for the number of early voters this year, turnout dropped statewide compared with the early voting turnout in the 2018 midterm elections. Unofficial voting totals by the Texas Secretary of State's office, which oversees Texas elections, they indicate statewide voter turnout is about 31%, while 2018 results showed a 40% turnout. Early voting turnout numbers include mail-in and in-person ballots cast during the early voting period, which started on October 24th and ended on Friday. Turnout rates are based on the proportion of people who voted among all registered voters.
more than half of voters surveyed believed misinformation on social media is an issue in this election. That's according to a study by the Texas Politics Project. The Global Witness and Cybersecurity for Democracy team at NYU tested popular social media apps to see how good they are at stopping the spread of misinformation. The team submitted fake political ads to YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok to find out if the ads would be taken down. YouTube suspended the accounts, Facebook still approved some ads, and TikTok approved 90% of the false ads. Given the fact that so many students turn to social media for their news, the NYU team is hoping their experiment urges social media companies to take a closer look at the integrity of their content. Coming up after the break, we'll take a look at the most talked about race this election, the race for the governor's office.
Recognize these poles? These are just a few of over 60 emergency blue light cell phone poles on SMU's campus.
If a student pushes the button on the to call button on the blue light phone, it immediately goes to our dispatch center. Dispatch immediately, it alerts them to what blue light phone was the button was pushed at. So they send officers to that phone. Even if nothing's said, just the button is pushed, they'll go to that location.
The poles are strategically placed so that a blue light can be seen from every point on campus.
I think the SMU campus police department does a really good job of always making sure we're really safe, but just in case they would ever need a little backup, we have the emergency poles.
If one person is helped by them, then they've done their job.
For more information, call the SMU Police Department at the number on your screen.
The Texas gubernatorial race between Beto O'Rourke and Governor Greg Abbott has been one of the most talked about campaigns nationally.
It's a high-stakes race with issues like border protection, abortion, gun control, and the economy at the center of it.
As we come down to the wire with polls closing shortly, SMU-TV's Jordan Stallings takes a look at Governor Abbott's bid for re-election.
The clock is ticking for Texas conservatives hoping to keep the Lone Star State red and Governor Abbott in office.
I think Texas is one of the few states that really has a sense of a state identity over an American identity.
While predictions can be difficult to trust, SMU political science professor Matthew Wilson describes the polls surrounding the Texas gubernatorial race as remarkably consistent.
We've seen Greg Abbott's margin of victory bounce around between 5 and 10 points, but Beto O'Rourke has never taken the lead in any credible poll, and Abbott has never really surged out to a huge lead. It's always been a solid lead for Abbott, but with O'Rourke within striking distance.
Wilson says Abbott supporters consistently rank economic prosperity as the issue that is most important to them. Texas voter and SMU student Raleigh Dewan agrees.
I think the economy is one of the most important aspects because so much flows from that. And if you have a good economy, if people are able to provide for themselves and there are good economic opportunities, that takes care of a lot of different issues. And most importantly, provides people with the agency to begin to solve some of their problems.
After the Uvalde school shooting last spring and Governor Abbott's ban on abortions in Texas, O'Rourke was quick to use the governor's stance on gun control and abortions against him. But Wilson believes social issues may not be enough for Texas voters to remove Abbott from office.
The problem for O'Rourke is that more people care about the economy, crime, and border security than say they care about gun control and abortion. And so that's why the issue mix right now is working better for Abbott than it is for O'Rourke.
That's the case for SMU freshman James Lane. He doesn't support Abbott's stance on abortion.
That's like the main thing I do not like about Abbott.
But will still vote for Abbott because of the current state of the economy.
He's Republican, but a little bit too Republican for me. But I want to say right-leaning, so I want Texas to say right-leaning, so that's why I would vote for Abbott.
Abbott has focused much of his campaign on border protection and immigration.
Abbott has talked a lot about the border and about criticizing the Biden administration for their failed response, in his view, to the surge of migrants at the southern border. Obviously, that resonates strongly in Texas. He's also been critical of the economic policies of the Biden administration and how much that has hurt Texas families.
Abbott has criticized the Biden administration throughout his run for re-election, and Wilson says that's to be expected.
When we have an unpopular Democratic president, which is what we have now, it makes sense for Abbott to run in distinction of himself vis-a-vis that Democratic president. We've seen a lot of that happening.
For SMU-TV, I'm Jordan Stallings.
O'Rourke's race for governor has garnered national attention. While early polls showed him falling behind incumbent Greg Abbott, O'Rourke's fans remained more dedicated than ever. SMU-TV's Millie Stevenson takes a look at O'Rourke's race to become Texas's first Democratic governor since 1995.
Beto O'Rourke has become famous for his recent bids for Senate and for president, and his race for Texas governor has been no different.
He became a bit of a national celebrity in Democratic circles, and I think he's brought some of that momentum forward in terms of his national fundraising prowess.
SMU political science professor Matthew Wilson says O'Rourke has become something of a darling among liberal activists around the country.
And that has really set him apart from your typical Texas Democratic gubernatorial candidate.
O'Rourke's campaign has focused on gun control, reproductive rights, and border security, issues many students say are important to them.
He has a good stance on gun control, in my opinion. He doesn't want to really get rid of it. He just wants more regulation.
I respect Beto for being youthful and speaking out and whatnot. But I also know he had claimed a year or two ago that he would ban AR-15 weapons completely, and he's kind of reformed on that. So I also admire him because he's very open-minded.
Many voters were motivated this election by the Supreme Court's historic decision to reverse Roe v. Wade. When incumbent Governor Greg Abbott instated a ban on abortions after 6 weeks, the O'Rourke campaign was quick to take aim at Abbott's controversial move, and in doing so, gained support from female voters.
I think the O'Rourke campaign is really hoping that the abortion issue will draw some previously non-participatory young women voters to the polls. I think we will see pretty strong voter turnout in Texas and nationally this time. I think it's likely that Texas turnout will still lag below the national turnout.
After losing against Ted Cruz in 2018 and the Democratic primaries in 2020, he says O'Rourke's reputation can't afford another loss.
He's got this celebrity cachet. He's got a devoted following around the country. He does energize young crowds, but there's only so many times that you can lose and still kind of retain that mojo and that public attention.
For SMU-TV, I'm Millie Stevenson.
The Daily Update is our student-run newscast. It's completely student-produced with the help of our department heads. We do a daily newscast with general assignment news.
So we're fortunate because we have a lot of state-of-the-art equipment that students get to use, from the cameras to sitting there in the director position, and even on the set. They just get the real-world experience of all the different positions and what it takes. It takes a team to make a newscast, and that's what they learn here too.
I love the team here. All the students are really passionate about putting on a great show and really working in a professional environment, so when we all come together, it's a great outcome.
For more information, follow on Twitter at SMU-TV.
Welcome back. It's now time to hear from one of the Hilltop's political experts for their take on the election.
Joining us is SMU's Director of Public Discourse, Professor Christopher Salinas, to talk about the impact of political rhetoric on public discourse in the digital age. For that conversation, let's go to Tulsi Lohani. Tulsi?
Thanks, Grace and Peter, and thank you to Professor Salinas for joining us on such an exciting election night. Welcome to the studio.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Of course. So my first question for you is talking about voter outreach in the digital age. So with an increase in text messages and political advertising on social media, how has this digital age impacted a hyper-polarized and increasingly young electorate?
That's a great question. So one thing that's important to understand is that
Political campaignings have always mirrored the reigning media technology at the time, whether or not that's pamphlets back in the 18th century, trains, newspapers, radio, television, and now we have the internet and more digital forms of communication. And the reason why it's always been important whenever it shifts, but the reason why it's particularly important now is because we've shifted from mass communication to social media. Right, mass media to social media. And what that means is, in a mass media context, you pay money for a television station, and they broadcast this to everyone that's watching it. So you kind of have to try to divine who that's going to. In social media, you can segment your audience almost as small as you want to. If you want 35-year-old housewives that are fans of Taylor Swift, you can find those, right? And then you target your message particularly tailored to them. And this is, you might have heard of the phrase data analytics or big data. That's where it really comes into play in this digital format. So they can really isolate and find the audience that they want to. And that not only has an impact in terms of who you vote for, but it also has an impact in fundraising and almost more importantly now, who you don't vote for. So all of those are impacts. Now, on the other side of that, you mentioned hyper-polarized public. One of the things that we've seen since the advent of social media and the internet, right around the time when those start to become a big thing, when Facebook emerges, we see in lots of research the more and more polarization of the populace. Now, that's not completely unique in the history of our nation. There have been other times when that's happened, but with the combination of digital media, what that means is that people can really kind of find themselves in echo chambers and only hearing messages and exposing themselves to messages that they want to hear, and they don't hear any of the other side. Now, remember I talked about mass media. Well, mass media, I might sit there and hear somebody talk on the television that I don't agree with, but at least I'm being exposed to that message. Now I'm only being exposed to one side of the message, and that creates more polarization.
Yes, thank you. And so when talking about different candidates and how people are reacting to the results tonight, and as candidates react to those results, what should we be looking for in their acceptance and concession speeches throughout the night?
So the acceptance and concession speeches are what we call a specific genre of speeches. And historically, they've kind of contained certain things. You want to thank people that voted for you, whether you won or lost. You want to thank the people that volunteered for your campaign, whether you won or lost. You want to talk about the hope for the future. You want to talk about how, whether you won or lost, and especially if you lost, how this is a victory for democracy. That, you know, I might have lost, but at least we all got our say, and the process was important. And this is the first big election where election denial has become an issue. That's become a new thing. So now we're not looking at just the normal things people do in a concession speech or an acceptance speech, but we have to look at, are they going to concede at all? Or are they going to use that opportunity to deny the election, and what are the implications for that? And as we've seen, like, you can almost endlessly deny or refuse to accept whatever the results of the election are. Now, obviously that depends upon the nature of the election. So if you're a Democrat and you've been running for a long time on, you shouldn't deny the election, we should accept the election results, then you're obviously not going to make a big deal about that. And if you do make a big deal about that, then that might be problematic for you, unless there are real issues, which again ties into the whole thing. So we're really kind of entering the unknown in what we'll see in kind of a large scale in terms of concession speeches and acceptance speeches. I expect, especially in Texas, for there to be a lot of pretty clear winners and losers. And you'll see the winners talking about how it's a great victory for the state, and it's a great victory for their message, and thanks for their supporters. And you'll see the losers doing what I said before. Thank you for everyone that supported us. We made a good effort, but you know, we'll have to go on to fight another day.
Yes, and we would like to thank you for joining us here in the studio tonight. Your insight and your work in public affairs means a lot to us. So thank you, Professor Salinas. And now I'm going to throw it back to Peter and Grace.
Thank you so much, Tulsi. We'll be back throughout the night with more election coverage from the Hilltop right here at SMU-TV.
You can also follow our team coverage at smudailycampus.com and on social media with the hashtag SMUVotes2022.
Thanks for tuning in, Mustangs. We'll see you back here as the poll results come in.